the Spot Track Podcast, talking sports contracts, the salary cap, and business of sports.
Today's edition of the Spot Track Podcast is presented by Authentic Audio Pro. If you need podcast, radio show, or any audio solution aid, including content creation, professional tools, recording, the works, visit AuthenticAudioPro.com today and get high-quality audio services at affordable cost. My name is Mike Ginnitti. It is Monday, June 17th. I'd be remiss if I didn't open with a phenomenal U.S. Open. I don't care if you hate golf. That was drama. That's as good as you can get. Look, outside of Tiger being in the mix there down the stretch, right? And certainly that wasn't going to be the case. But Live versus PGA, you know, the bro versus the professional side, you had it kind of every angle, and everybody handled things well. And I'm going to even include Rory speeding off in his car because, look, this dude has been in front of the microphone. He has done the right thing. You miss a 30 and a 45-inch putt, bail out on $2 million cash, and a legitimate chance at winning a major again finally 10 years later. I get it. You needed a couple hours to digest. He will speak. He's going to do the right thing. It was not the right moment for him to do that, and I think we have to accept that. And I'm sorry that there are people who have jobs to do that have to think otherwise, and I get that. But that's just, from like an athlete standpoint, a coaching standpoint, where my head kind of lives. There are some times when it's better to walk away than actually say the words out loud or even try to fake the right words out loud. Those are the numbers. Bryson wins $4.3 million yesterday. Rory wins $2.32. So it's a $1.98 million difference between first and second. Some quick numbers on Bryson. That now brings him north of 40 million earned on the PGA or majors timeline. Okay. So anything he earned previously on the PGA Tour or in a major has now exceeded $41 million. And in terms of Live and the tournaments and the team payouts there in 2.5 seasons, he's just over 26 million. So obviously the money is better on the right than the left. I did some digging, and the reports when he officially signed with Live, this was June of 2022. 4 years, 125 million. Again, we don't know how that works. We don't know if that's a guarantee, if that's based on, if the earnings he makes on the course pull from that or are in addition to that, if he's got to hit certain thresholds, if he's got to stay a certain amount of time. But that's the number that came out, and those are the types of numbers that many of these players have been flocking to Live for. So he's doing just fine. He's certainly righted the ship in every regard. I mean, he has molded his body. He has refined the analytics side of golf to maybe an annoying degree, right? I mean, what he is doing, that wad, that pad he has in his back pocket with his initials spelled out, that is journaling and notes and everything that he needs and requires to be the best version of himself right now, and it's working. He has improved his game mightily. He has improved his ability to be clutch in the biggest moments, no bigger than that bunker shot, of course. And his relationship with the fans, and I was a little skeptical because it didn't seem like the reaction that you were watching in terms of the crowd matched the crowd noise, and there's been some, let's just say, some accusations of pumped-in crowd noise at golf events in the past. I'm not going to say that happened yesterday, but it didn't feel like one hand was feeding the other. That all changed after the fact when he spent the next, 5 hours at the golf course speaking with anyone with a microphone, anyone with a pen that wanted an autograph, any kid, up and down, left and right. He took the whole tour, and he got his money's worth, and he gave everybody there their money's worth. And that's rare in this sport. This is one of those Caitlin Clark type situations where now you have just made a few hundred, if not a few thousand extra fans just for a couple hours worth of time. And by the way, the TV cameras didn't stop rolling. So all the video, all the proof of this is now all over Twitter, all over Threads, etc. And it's making the rounds. And that goes to the bigger point, which is as he was transforming his mind and his body, both of which have clearly went through, massive upgrades in the past 9 months, he was doing so sort of old school. He was vlogging on YouTube, right? He was journaling his thoughts, and fans really started to buy into it. to the point of where there's no question he's making a couple extra million through that YouTube channel, which is nice and successful. But he built a connection there. He started to gain trust from fans, and then he started to put his mouth where his money is, both in terms of winning events, showing up at the majors, being relevant in the majors, and now this. Now actually finishing the job, taking the trophy, putting it in the hands of the fans, shaking hands, signing autographs. This is what it takes. And it's not that freaking hard, right? Look, not all guys and girls have this kind of DNA and want this kind of attention and limelight and spotlight. And there's a lot of people that will never appreciate somebody doing something like this because it seems arrogant. And there's a side that certainly is. But in the modern day, with the ability to basically to go from 0 to 100 in terms of popularity, and look, there's thousands of high schoolers doing this every day. They just need the one good idea or one freaking good dance move, okay, to go viral. That's what these professional players have figured out as well. Kevin Durant has done this a few times, right? Certainly the women in sports and the college athletes coming through with nil have figured out that it just takes a couple of shining moments. This is Bryson's shining moment. And he has been building up to this. He has been building an online fan base. He has been building up his ability to compete. And this is the culmination now. This is the culmination. This is hands down one of the most important wins in his career. And, you know, I'm projecting a hell of a lot here. This has to be something. This has to be a moment that makes PGA and LIV look at each other and say, what are we doing? How are we both not capturing this together? It has to. Okay, you had Rory and Bryson, maybe the two biggest figures in each side specifically. You know, Brooks Koepka, there's a few others out there, of course, but pretty damn close to having number one versus number one in terms of left and right here, LIV and PGA. On the same spotlight. Now, do you think it's only relevant 4 times a year? Maybe the majors are all this matters at, but I don't think so. I think with a guy like Bryson, who is ridiculously marketable and now maybe winning to go with it, the PGA Tour has to see this and say, this is ridiculous. We need guys like that back on our side. Let's push to get something done. I hope that's the biggest takeaway from yesterday, not Bryson's arrogance or Rory speeding off in the parking lot, that we need this constantly at the smallest tournaments and also at the biggest tournaments, because we're being robbed of this much of the season as LIV Golf lives on CW and the PGA kind of plummets through their non-important tournament schedule here for the next couple of weeks. We'll get there, but that's my biggest takeaway. Not so much the money, but the marketability side of it. That's what Bryson is, and now he's earning his due. He's not just a guy going out there trying to be a bro and looking for a spotlight he doesn't deserve. Now he's deserving of it, and now he's gonna bank off it. And I hope both sides decide they want to start banking off it as well. Let's talk football. I attempted to do a Trevor Lawrence extension contract breakdown pod last Friday, but I was projecting. I didn't yet have the data. I was talking about the surfacey numbers only. So I ripped that thing off of our account as quickly as humanly possible because I didn't want to assume. And then the numbers came out, and here we are. I have the breakdown. I was right on most of it in terms of this being a $200 million guarantee over 4.5 years. But that's really what we're talking about here. The opening discussion with this extension is that both sides agreed to this after 3 years, and I didn't think that was going to be the case. Trevor is sort of selling low here. Okay, I wouldn't say 2023 was any kind of momentum towards garnering the biggest contract in NFL history, right? And Jacksonville could have waited. Both sides could have waited here. Now look, it's much more dangerous for Jacksonville to wait a year than it is for Trevor Lawrence, because we know where Dak's contract is going. We know that Tua's on the precipice of probably this exact same Lawrence extension, if not a little higher. And there's more coming. Okay. We've seen it with the wide receivers. If you're waiting a month, you're increasing your pay by about 12 to 15%, because that market, even the second tier of that market, just continues to explode. So getting both sides to say, we need to get this done now, and coming to a number that works is important for Jacksonville, because they're not going to be in this window of contention for 6 years. They're just not. No team is. Definitely not Jacksonville. And that's no slight against them. It's just not one of those destination spots. We saw them go through this iteration with Blake Bortles. That ended up being a swing and a miss, of course. But here they are now with a more talented quarterback who, quite frankly, hasn't shown consistently that he's a better quarterback, right? In many cases. But we know the ceiling. Jacksonville's paying for the ceiling here. And they didn't have to go top dollar in every ranking regard to do it. Yes, $55 million a year ties for first with Joe Burrow. But $55 million in 2024 is markedly different than $55 million in September of 2023 when Joe Burrow signed his, because the cap went up 13.5%. So percentage-wise, Joe Burrow is 24 and change percent of last year's salary cap, which is the highest in the NFL still right now. And Trevor Lawrence is at 21.5 of this year's league salary cap, which is 10th. So we saw Jared Goff percentage AAV become 10th about a month ago. And now Lawrence replaced him, bumping Goff down to 11th at 21.5%. So two quarterbacks that we didn't think necessarily deserved to go to the top of the mountain did in some cases, but didn't in overall grand numbers, percentage based. Top 10, that's it. Top 10. So don't go crazy. All right. Trevor Lawrence didn't deserve a top of the mountain contract. He didn't get one. Now, 5 years for $202 million, which is the practical guarantee. It's not nothing. All right. So his adjusted AAV in that regard, based on the potential out, is over $40 million a year. That's not nothing. And I can tell you right now, mathematically speaking, our algorithm says he's a $40 million quarterback. So that's right on the nuts. That's exactly what Trevor Lawrence is going to be worth over the next 5 seasons, which is an aggressive contention window for Jacksonville, either divisionally or conference stand-wise. But that's where we are. All right. That's where we are with this. This is a team that is trying to continue to push. They were aggressive this offseason. Extensions, free agents, the works. They're probably not done. Okay. I would assume that Travis Etienne is next, and maybe even one or two more in terms of a cornerback and maybe a linebacker that I've heard in Jacksonville's radio landscape. But I don't think they're done. I think they understand that they just have to make everybody happy right now for 3-4 years, and maybe they'll hit lightning in a bottle. And that's fair. In that division, it's completely fair. It's not a weak division, but it's not one of the stronger divisions either. Cap-wise, you ready for this? This is a 5 bonus contract. 1 signing bonus at $37.5 million, and 4 consecutive $35 million option bonuses through 2028. In other words, now they have the choice to take those on as base salaries or option bonuses, but by default, you treat them as option bonuses, so you spread them out 5 years. So out of the gate, the default version of this contract, as you'll see on Spot Track, here's the cap hits over the next 5 years: $15 million, $17 million, $24 million, $35 million, $47 million. That's assuming exercised option bonuses in every regard. In 2028, a $47 million cap hit is going to be against what? A $325 million salary cap? It's going to be peanuts. It's going to be absolute peanuts. So the Jacksonville will have the ability, again, 5 years is aggressive. They'll have the ability to say in 2027 or 2028, all right, it's not going well. We're no longer in this window of contention. We don't want to stretch the dead cap out anymore. We'll take that $35 million hit all this year, as Denver just did with Russell Wilson, and either move on from him or keep him at that high cash salary. And then we'll be able to cut our losses and get out of this thing a little bit earlier. But early investing guarantees right through 2028. So there's 24, 25, 26, and some 27 compensation guaranteed right now at signing for $142 million total. That's a big number. That's a lot of dollars going into escrow from that Jacksonville owner. And then next year, more 2027 salary locks in. And then by March of 2027, all of 2028 locks. So like I said, early mechanisms all the way through 2028. That's pretty strong for a quarterback of his inconsistency right now. But the option bonuses help them from a cap perspective. Trevor Lawrence agreeing to this contract now and not forcing Jacksonville to wait till next year when he's probably going to be better and the market's going to be bigger, that's a concession Jacksonville's willing to take on. We'll pay you, we'll make this a little bit stronger in terms of potential guarantees this year because it's this year, because you're 25, because we're in the middle of this thing right now. Because if we have to, slap ourselves in 2028 and try to get out of this thing ugly like Denver just did, we'll do it. But we want 4 good years. We want 25 to 28-year-old Trevor Lawrence happy under contract and cap friendly, which is exactly what this contract is. And look, I'm not a huge fan of going 3, 4, 5 bonuses like this. As long as you're going to be able to say no to one of those and decline the option and take on salary and front load this thing a little bit more. Because look, 2029 and 2030 cap hits right now are 78.5 and 74.8, and I'm using void years. Okay. So there's obviously fluff built into this, right? The cash flow kind of resembles that, right? It's in the 30s for 3 years, in the 40s for 2 years, and then it's 50 and 54 to finish it off. So, don't go out there thinking that this is Lamar Jackson's free agent contract that was $82 million in year one and unbelievable 2 and 3 and 4 year pay. That's not what had to happen here. They still got their team friendly, backloaded, cap nice contract. There's an extra year guaranteed, in my opinion, right? That 2028 season. And they're willing to do that. It's a bit of a baseball mantra. Well, we're willing to tack on an extra year, knowing that A, it could be great. You could hit that ceiling and it could be great. Or B, we'll be able to decline that option, take it all on, and then get out of this thing and move on to our next chapter. Either way. So that's the deal, right? The cash flow, the cap flow, the guarantee structure, all the nuts and bolts are broken down on a piece on SpotTrack.com right now, as I do with all these major contracts. Any questions, hit me up at SpotTrack on X or Threads. Mike Tomlin is the latest example that the Pittsburgh Steelers are going all in. Feel really good about this young team and a couple of veterans that certainly can hold their own in TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and et cetera. Extended through 2027. He's not going anywhere. It's interesting because they really don't have a quarterback next year, So not only are these guys competing, Russell Wilson, Justin Fields, competing for September 5th, right? But they're also kind of both competing for possibly this starting job going forward. And Tomlin sticking around kind of makes it feel like one of these guys could be here more than one season, right? It feels like somebody's going to win this job and actually be a 3 or 4 year bridge quarterback for wherever this thing is headed. Speaking of Cam Hayward, he's in a bit of a contract struggle. He's in the twilight zone here in terms of his career, still playing extremely well. Had an injury filled 2023. It seems like this is one of those things where you take a bunch of the money that exists in this final year of his contract, turn it into a signing bonus, bump it out 2 more years, make it all work from a cap standpoint and a void standpoint. Just hand him a big signing bonus, which is what Pittsburgh does anyway with their contracts. Doesn't seem like the Steelers are super thrilled about the numbers he's asking for. But look, he's already owed $16 million cash this year in terms of base salary. So they were probably planning on doing a cap conversion anyway. It's just simply a matter of can we build in some guarantees at 2025, maybe even just a roster bonus that if we have to buy him out into retirement, we can do so. He's saying all the right things. He wants to continue to play through 2025 and maybe beyond. Pittsburgh wants to make this a 1-year deal, and I get it from that point. There's still ways to do this where it's a big signing bonus now. There's a small guaranteed roster bonus next year to keep things early and some cash in hand for him. And oh, by the way, if he's great, like some of these Eagles players have still been, you build in a dummy salary, you convert that to a guarantee at some point in time, and you keep him through 2025, and then he retires a Steeler. He's 35, just barely 35 years old now. So tons of risk there. You understand all of that. But feels like a bump out contract is coming just to resolve things because, like I've said, everything else from Pittsburgh's standpoint screams, we're going. Gas pedals down. We're going. So you want to make guys like this happy to make sure there's no riffraff as you head towards training camp and then certainly into the start of the 2024 season. But this is a team that I've got feelers out on, right? The gambling version of me is watching this Steelers offseason with extreme interest because it does feel like they're saying to us out loud, hey, I know you're forgetting about us because of the rest of this division and what it looks like and all the money that's getting tossed around. And we're playing with house money with two quarterbacks right now. But there's a lot to like on this roster. And I think that's something to keep an eye on for sure. I mentioned it a little bit before. I want to reiterate Darren Waller retiring. We had a bunch of post June 1st actual retirements, right? Corey Linsley, Darren Waller. I'm missing a few here. Jason Kelsey, of course. The Waller one's interesting because of just how much he kind of brought with him baggage wise from Vegas, from the Raiders. It was a 3rd round pick. It was the number 100 overall pick that the Giants gave up for him. That was a 2023 draft pick. And they just didn't get any bang for buck out of this thing. All right. They just didn't. They got 12 games total, 52 catches. So he still showed signs of being productive. 1 touchdown, still over that 10 per reception mark in terms of yardage. But you just knew that the wheels were going to fall off eventually here. And he's got one of those injuries that just doesn't go away. So a swing and a miss from the Giants standpoint. This was one of the better tight ends. If he was able to hold this thing out for a couple more seasons, you think he'd be in the conversation as one of the better tight ends all time, but cut short due to injury. And here we are with that. $11.5 million saved from the Giants by post June 1st retiring him. But there's some dead cap now built into next year to the tune of almost $5 million. So they'll be feeling this at least a little bit next year. And then they'll clean their hands of probably a lot of contracts after the upcoming 2024 season, as we've talked about. Tee Higgins, officially, I think we are hearing, it's being stated by all the right people that he's going to sign this franchise tag. It's been clear to me that this was the case. This is exactly what Cincinnati wanted. Hey, we're dying to pay you $21.8 million this year. We just don't want to do any more. Okay, we don't want to make it a different 1-year deal. We don't want to give you $100 million guaranteed on a 4-year extension. We just want this right now. Okay, we got Jamar Chase. He's clearly slightly more alpha than you in terms of how our usage is going to be with Joe Burrow. That's the guy we have to focus on. We're going to pay you well, but it's going to be for 1 season and it's going to be fully guaranteed. You just have to sign this dotted line. He's now done that. He's accepted his role. He's understanding where things are going to be. They did this with Jesse Bates, the safety, 2 years ago. They let him walk in free agency to a huge contract with Atlanta that immediately paid dividends for them. This is what's going to happen, in my opinion, next year. It's possible that a second tag comes, but not if Jamar Chase is already signed, right? They're not going to go 26.1, even on a placeholder franchise tag, which is what it would be, 120% of this current franchise tag. They're just not going there. So I expect Higgins to be a free agent in 2025, and that's A, great for him, and B, great news for the rest of the league who are looking for that preeminent, better version of Calvin Ridley, which is what we had this year, who scored, I believe it was 4 for 92, 51 guaranteed, somewhere along that. Tee Higgins is going to blow it out of the water as long as he has a Tee Higgins type 2024 campaign. But this was inevitable. I was sure it would get a lot closer to that July 15th deadline, but clearly he and his agent have read the room properly, that this is exactly what the Bengals want. They are not going to even pick up a phone and call with an offer. And they are not going to pick up a phone and call other teams to try to trade you either. Okay. Which is in their hands right now. They have all the power. And that's unfortunately what this franchise tag can do. The only power he had is to not sign this and not play. And then you're forfeiting 1/18 of $21.8 million, right? Which is $1.2 million per week. And we've seen that backfire too many times now with big stars. There was no way Higgins was getting out of this one. So I'm glad he came to his senses with this, and it was always going to come this way for Cincinnati. I guess the question here is, does it mean Jamar Chase gets his extension, or, and this is sort of how I'd framed things back a couple months ago when I started the offseason work, or is it simply that having this expensive franchise tag means Jamar Chase is going to stay on his rookie contract so that the balance works out well for them, right? High-priced Tee Higgins, $22 million. Jamar Chase at a $9.8 million cap hit, which leads to a little under $5 million cash. Not great, but right? We're talking $30 million for these two players. Doable. Great. Or you're going to rip this Band-Aid off and extend him out now. They've got Jamar Chase under a $21.8 million fifth-year option next year. That's exercise fully guaranteed. So he's a 2 for 30 on his own right now. The right thing to do would be to extend him. But Cincinnati has shown that they will put their foot down at times. And even in this Joe Burrow era, right, with players like Trey Hendrickson, who they just kind of band-aided, and he's still not super pleased about it. We'll see. I don't think it immediately means Jamar Chase gets a contract, nor do I think Jamar Chase should sign a contract until CeeDee Lamb does. Because I think those two are very, very joined at the hip here in terms of how the negotiation should be going. So it's a bit of a cat and a mouse game for both team and player. And I think in the perfect world, the Bengals want nothing more to happen. They want T to sign this franchise tag. They want to keep Jamar Chase on the fourth year of his rookie contract. They want to let T walk next year. And then they'll hand Jamar Chase his massive, 16, 17% of the salary cap contract next year to go along with CeeDee Lamb, who, I don't know, is he going to be a franchise tag player next year? Right? I mean, if Dallas doesn't step up their game here, that's where we're headed. CeeDee Lamb on a franchise tag and Jamar Chase being the one to be the next monster extension. So fascinating stuff out of the wide receiver position. We've been talking about it for a year and a half now. It continues to be must talk conversations. The Falcons, speaking of which, they got slapped with a tampering violation, three, I think, right? 3 violations. They got fined. The GM got fined, and they lost was it a fifth? God, it was so inconsistent to everything else that I don't even remember what it is. Okay, it's a 2025 fifth round pick. I don't think enough people are pissed about this. All right, because they colluded with 3 players. And I get it. This stuff happens with every team every offseason. I'm air quoting, right? It's the wink, wink negotiation process, right? We send a player in to do some talking, blah, blah, whatever it's going to be. There's an investigation every year. We're finding this stuff every year. I just don't understand how some of the situations were first round picks and millions of dollars. And these 3 were a literal slap on the wrist. $250,000 fine to the team, $50,000 fine to the GM, and a 5th round pick in 2025. Are we nitpicking the process of tampering? Right? I mean, did they use a burner email or a burner Snapchat DM to get to these guys? And that isn't considered as bad as, an owner vacationing with a quarterback and trying to talk him into, joining their team in 18 months? I guess, but it shouldn't be. If you want this stuff to go away, every single version of this should look like the worst scenario ever. It's what they're doing with gambling, right? It's what most of these sports have done with gambling. We have to treat every single version of this like it's, the worst thing you can think of. We want the attention out there on the negative side of this because we need guys to know that we're going to be dropping the hammer, even if you screw up a little bit, because it's an integrity situation now in every sport. And if you think people aren't gambling behind their backs on free agent moves and extensions, you're wrong. Okay. You're wrong. There was definitely money out there on where Kirk Cousins was going to end up in 2024 free agency. 100% guaranteed. Mark my words. So integrity doesn't just stop with goal line stands and points shaving and all the stuff we've talked about. And now we've got Major League Baseball referees involved, unfortunately, umpires. This tampering stuff should be treated like the gambling stuff. Every iteration of it needs to be more than a slap on the wrist. Unless you really don't care. To me, that's what they've said out loud. There are some times where we just don't care. And we're going to make it a Friday news dump with a late round draft pick lost. And we're going to move on with our lives so that we don't take too much negative attention. I just don't agree with that. Tampering, gambling, things like that can change the discourse of a single season or a single game in gambling standpoint should be addressed at the highest level. And they should be big news. And more people should be talking about it at the highest level. So not super thrilled with that one, but we'll see where we go from here. Speaking of baseball, a couple of nice runs here in terms of what the Mets, the Yankees, even the Red Sox have been able to do over the past couple of weeks here. We talked to Dan last week about some of the teams that are really fringe with how they're going to approach the final, month here. Yeah, 5 weeks before we get to that July 30th trade deadline. Just don't get your hopes up. That's all I'm going to say to you. All right, there's going to be so many teams that think they're relevant, at least for a wild card spot, that the trade deadline is almost moot in this league because of the playoff expansion. And that's okay. That's okay, right? It's the dog days. We don't really need too much riffraff, too much moving around, because you're renting a good player for 6 weeks and giving a C or D prospect. That's just what it's become. Should more teams do, MLB player trade for MLB player trades? Yes. We see the NFL start to pick that up a little bit more. The winters have been good for Major League Baseball, and the next winter is going to be good with Pete Alonso and Corbin Burns and certainly Juan Soto in the mix. Another Boris-driven winter, by the way, coming. So just don't get your hopes up. So many of these teams are fluctuating to the point of where the decision-making is going to be impossible by July 30th. I expect a lot of teams just to stand pat, make a couple fringe moves, and try to sneak into the wild card and see if that's enough to make a run. But it's just one of those scenarios where the deadline itself has been deflated to a bad news degree. Let's put it that way. It's really tough to follow it, knowing that it's going to be not as exciting as we want it to be when all the other sports have really, really become. I mean, the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to deadlines in hockey and basketball and even football now have become really, really good content and really good follows, and kind of microcosms to what's going to happen in free agency, because we hear about teams shopping certain players, and then we know, hey, there could be some serious movement, if not now, in the upcoming offseason. So for that much, knowing that teams are at least feeling some names out there by July 30th in Major League Baseball, we'll keep an eye on that, but it just doesn't have the degree of difficulty that many of these other sports have become accustomed to. We'll see if the Celtics can close it out tonight. We'll see if the Panthers can close it out tonight. In hockey, we've already flipped the offseason mode on Spot Track with both of those sports. Continue to expand both of those sports on our site as well, especially the NBA stuff. I know Scott has greenlit a trade machine that has gotten a lot of positive reviews, and we continue to beef that up as things get bigger and bigger down the road. And I believe we have a WNBA trade machine coming soon, because why not? This league is here and not going anywhere, and the trade deadline is approaching on that. And there's games on TV all the time. So if you're finding yourself watching it and you're enjoying it and you want to understand how this stuff works, our WNBA pages are live, up to date, active, and we will soon have a couple of tools to let you play around with that as well. That's more coming from SpotTrack.com. For Scott Allen, my name is Mike Ginnitti. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Spot Track Podcast.